The children's classic sitting on the nursery shelf ends with its hero unable to stand the smell of his own wife and children. He buys 2 horses. He talks to them for 4 hours a day. When his wife embraces him after 5 years apart, he faints from disgust, and for a year he cannot bear to eat at the same table as the people who love him. That is the ending of Gulliver's Travels, the real one, the one they cut out before they hand you the picture book. And here is the argument I want to make. The story you were told is a lie. Not a gentle simplification. A deliberate amputation of one of the most savage books in the English language. Because Gulliver's Travels is not a fantasy about tiny people and giants. It is a weapon. Jonathan Swift built it, plank by plank, as a systematic assault on human pride, on our politics, our science, our institutions, and finally on the human animal itself. Every voyage turns the knife a little deeper. And the reason it survives disguised as a bedtime story is that the disguise is the safest place to hide something this dangerous. Let me show you what's actually inside. But first, where it came from. Swift published it in 1726, and he published it anonymously. That matters. He didn't want his name near it. He smuggled the manuscript to a London printer through intermediaries and even altered the handwriting so it couldn't be traced. This was a man who had been Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, a senior clergyman, releasing a book so corrosive that ownership was a liability. The full title pretends it's a travel memoir, Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World, by Lemuel Gulliver. A hoax. A fake genre wrapped around a bomb. And the first thing the bomb goes off on is politics. Everyone remembers Lilliput, the little people, the man tied down by 1,000 tiny ropes. What they forget is what those little people are arguing about. Lilliput is at war. A brutal, bloody, generations-long war. And the cause? Which end of a boiled egg you should crack. One faction, the big Endians, crack the large end. The other, the little Endians, crack the small end. The emperor's grandfather cut his finger cracking an egg the old way, so a decree went out, crack the small end. Thousands have died over it. Rebellions, exiles, a religious schism, a foreign war. Over an egg. Swift is not being whimsical. He is describing, exactly, the wars of religion that had drowned Europe in blood, Catholic and Protestant killing each other over doctrinal differences he considered no larger than the end of an egg. And here's a fact that outlived the satire. Computer scientists borrowed those words. Big Endian and Little Endian are now the standard terms for how machines order bytes in memory. A joke about a stupid war became permanent engineering vocabulary. But Swift wasn't done with pettiness. He wanted to show you how small greatness really is. Look closer at Lilliput and the satire sharpens into a portrait. High office is awarded by rope dancing. Whoever can caper highest on a tightrope without falling gets the top government job. Court honors are won by leaping over and crawling under a stick the emperor holds. This is Swift's account of how ambition actually works. Flattery, acrobatics, currying favor, none of it connected to competence or virtue. Gulliver, the giant, could crush this entire kingdom underfoot, and instead, he lets himself be tied down, tried for treason, and threatened with having his eyes put out, for the crime of putting out a palace fire in an undignified way. The mighty made ridiculous by the trivial. Swift's target isn't Lilliput. It's the reader's own government, seen from the height of a man looking down at ants. And then he does something crueler. He flips the telescope. In the second voyage, Gulliver washes up in Brobdingnag, a land of giants, and now he is the tiny one. Now he is the insect. And this is where the satire stops being funny. Gulliver, proud of his civilization, sits with the king of Brobdingnag and boasts about England, about gunpowder, about parliaments and courts, and the glory of European history. He even offers, as a gift, the secret of making cannon, weapons that can tear men to pieces by the hundred. He expects the giant king to be impressed. Instead, the king is horrified. He listens to the whole proud account of humanity and then delivers the sentence that is the black heart of the book. He concludes that the bulk of Gulliver's countrymen are, and I'm quoting Swift directly, the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. Vermin. Not a metaphor Gulliver invented. A verdict, handed down by a wiser being looking at us the way we look at lice. And Swift makes sure you can't dismiss it, because the king is the one decent ruler in the whole book. Notice what Swift has done structurally. In Lilliput, we look down on tiny men and see how petty they are. In Brobdingnag, we are looked down upon and discover the pettiness was ours all along. Scale is the trick, but the target never moves, it's always us. Up close, the giant maids of honor disgust Gulliver, their pores like pits, their skin coarse as hide, their smell overpowering. He is repelled by the human body simply magnified. Swift is already teaching you the lesson the fourth voyage will drive home like a nail, that human beauty, human dignity, is a matter of distance. Get close enough and we are all monstrous. But before the final descent, Swift takes aim at the thing his own century worshipped most: reason and science. The third voyage is the one abridgments shorten or drop, and it's the strangest. Gulliver visits Laputa, a flying island, a landmass that literally floats above the country it rules, held aloft by magnetism. The Laputans are intellectuals, mathematicians, astronomers, so lost in abstract thought that servants have to flick their ears with little bladders to remind them to listen when spoken to. Their houses are badly built because they despise practical geometry. Their clothes don't fit because they measure by instruments instead of looking. They rule the land below by hovering over it, blocking its sun and rain, dropping the island to crush any town that rebels. Swift is drawing the flying island of pure theory, knowledge divorced from use, cleverness with no wisdom, a ruling class that hovers above ordinary life and cannot even sew a coat that fits. And then he sends Gulliver to their research academy, and the satire becomes prophecy. At the Academy of Lagadoo, Swift built a museum of useless genius that reads like a laboratory catalog from the present day. One scientist has spent 8 years trying to extract sunbeams from cucumbers. Another labors to turn human excrement back into food. One is building a machine that generates books and philosophy at random by cranking a handle, words tumbling into new combinations, science by brute automation, meaning by accident. Swift wrote that in the 1720s. It is almost unbearably close to a satire of generative machinery producing text with no understanding behind it. His point was never that curiosity is bad. It was that reason unmoored from purpose becomes a kind of madness, brilliant men solving problems no one has, while the roofs leak and the fields go to ruin. He was mocking the techno-utopians of his day. He would recognize ours instantly. And having demolished politics and pride and science, Swift arrives at the voyage they cut out entirely. The fourth voyage is why the children's editions exist. Gulliver arrives in a land ruled by horses, the Hounds, pronounced almost like a whinny, calm and rational and gentle, governed entirely by reason, without a word in their language for lying or for evil, because they have no concept of either. And sharing that land is another species, the Yahoos. Filthy, howling, violent brutes who fling excrement, fight over shiny stones, gorge and vomit and rot in the dirt. And slowly, with mounting horror, Gulliver realizes what the Yahoos are. They are human beings. Stripped of clothes, of manners, of the flattering distance of civilization. This is us. Swift gives the horses the reason we claim as our species' glory, and gives our own bodies and appetites to the beasts. The word Yahoo enters the English language right here, from this book, in 1726, a name Swift invented for the human animal at its most degraded, and which we still use, 3 centuries later, to mean exactly that, a brute, a lout, a savage. But the cruelest stroke is what it does to Gulliver. He goes native among the horses. He learns to think of himself as almost a Houyhnhnm, and to see his own kind as vermin. When his rational horse masters gently point out that his body is a Yahoo's body, he is filled with self-loathing so total he can no longer bear to look at his reflection. And when they finally expel him, because he is, after all, only a Yahoo who can talk, he is broken. He returns to England physically, but he never returns in spirit. He cannot endure the company of people. He faints at his wife's touch. He fills his nose with rue and tobacco to blot out the human smell. He buys horses and confides in them. Swift leaves his hero not enlightened, but destroyed, driven mad by reason, poisoned by the very clarity the fourth voyage forced on him. This is the ending the picture books amputate, and now you know why. It's unbearable. And here's the question I want to leave you sitting inside. Is Gulliver right? Because that's the trap Swift built. Gulliver ends the book a misanthrope, disgusted by all humanity, worshipping cold reason and despising warm, flawed people, and it is genuinely hard to tell how much of that disgust Swift shares. Some readers take the fourth voyage as Swift's own creed. Humanity is Yahoo, and only the horses are worthy. Others argue the opposite, that Gulliver is the final satire, a man who took reason so far he lost his humanity, who chose the sterile perfection of the horses over the messy love of his own family, and became a fool of a different kind. The scholar Claude Rawson spent a career on that knife edge on whether Swift is condemning humanity or condemning the man who condemns humanity. Swift will not tell you. He leaves you to decide which is worse, the Yahoo or the man who can no longer love one. That's why this book refuses to age. Read Gulliver today, and you are reading about political tribes at war over differences the size of an egg. About a class that floats above ordinary life, dazzled by its own cleverness, dropping its weight on the towns below. About performative reason, people who have decided they are the Howans and everyone who disagrees is a Yahoo. About the online misanthrope, marinating in contempt for the whole human race from behind a screen, certain he sees clearly what others are too foolish to. Swift wrote the manual for that mind, and then asked whether the mind was wise or simply sick. His companion piece, A Modest Proposal, pulls the same trick in miniature, a calm, reasonable essay suggesting the Irish poor sell their babies as food, so perfectly logical it makes your blood run cold. That's the Swiftian move. Reason, taken to its end, without mercy, becomes monstrous. So the next time you see Gulliver's travels shelved between the fairy tales, understand what's really there under the tiny people and the giants. A man who despised human pride so thoroughly, he spent his masterpiece dismantling it, voyage by voyage, until nothing was left standing, not our politics, not our science, not our reason, not even our right to think ourselves better than beasts. It was never a children's book. It's a mirror, and Swift held it up close, at exactly the distance where we stop looking beautiful. The question is whether you can bear to keep looking. If this changed how you think about Gulliver's travels, subscribe. We break down the most important books ever written, one argument at a time. New video every week. And if this was worth 10 minutes of your life, hit like. It helps the channel more than you think.